look at older and more evolved art economies, you can see that art is a veritable investment instrument and destination, with values that can be quite staggering. I know that in terms of Nigeria, we're quite early in the life cycle of the art market, but do you see a trajectory where we move towards a more sophisticated, more certain financial art ecosystem?
Yeah, you're right. Like you mentioned, it's a journey, and we're somewhere on that journey. We definitely will get there. Clearly, I spoke to some artists outside, and she mentioned about the generation of people that have been viewing a lot of the works and stuff like that. And I told her that, what I thought was that, yes, they are much younger, but the fact of life is that a lot of these guys are going to inherit significant assets at some point or the other. Now, this generation, these people, as from what I've seen, and in our world, they do not buy the things our generation bought. They do not like to own things, and they are interested in other things. So I think down the line, you probably will find a lot of people, developing a taste and acquiring interest in making purchases with this thing, simply because they are becoming more rich, they're getting wealthier, simply because a lot of these things are no longer available, so there's a reduction in supply. So with those two factors, demand going up, supply coming up, definitely find a better pricing methodology, and the model will come up, and definitely will get. Then the role of technology, clearly, with information freely available, we will definitely have a lot of certainty around valuation of price and return on line.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, in terms of your positioning vis-a-vis lifestyle, because you hinted to the fact that you are here because your customers are here, and your customers are here because their interest and their money to some extent is in this market. And so that means that you're developing a relationship with the art world. How does this manifest in terms of your corporate social responsibility as well as your relationship with your clients?
Yeah, so as a group, we do have quite a lot of avenues we support the creative arts, if I can use that as a general word. And we, both in Nigeria and in our parent company, we're part of Standard Bank Group, the largest banking group in Africa. We do have a significant art collection. I was just made aware of that when I came up with this, with this my challenge. So it's something that as an organization we are very focused on, and we would progress in the discussions and the opportunities arise. Clearly, we have quite a lot of clients interested in this, and again, they gave me one or two things that you need to create activities around the arts. You need to create events and stuff like that. And fortunately, our head of marketing and communications is here, and she's been also giving the feedback that we need to do a whole lot more, and just get better share of mind, and increasingly get a feel of the passion of our clients, because these things are not written on paper, they're being to and become more valuable in their eyes.
I really support your desire to give more. I think that's very laudable. Now, I'd like to talk about information and risk. I mean, if you look at an asset, before you invest and what you do with the investment and how you manage it, you get information about it, you get to know more about it. But there are also risks connected with art. Art tends to move around, it's not in one place. It can be vulnerable has all kinds of hazards. How do you go about sort of talking to your clients about those aspects? Is it an insurance matter? We have floods in places in the world, fire, there are all kinds of risks. But also the financial risks which you spoke about. For example, how do you assess liquidity, of an art piece? Can this stand as an asset against which money can be lent? So if you look at it from that almost technical financial point of view, how do you sort of guide your clients towards addressing these risks, which also apply to art?
So we, clearly it's something that it's an asset class that the amount of knowledge you have on it really determines how much you can make out of it. And in our business, in our group, we do have some wealth managers. One of them is here, Will, who are experts in alternative assets. Will, you want to put up your hand so that... So Will is from Jersey. We have an offshore location in Jersey, and we do have experts in the arts and in alternative assets who we can point out and direct our clients from a portfolio structuring point of view, and they can provide the required assistance. In terms of the risk management, insurance definitely is something that we would always advise. I know of a few cases where we've had transactions where, to my mind, even storage of some of those things was a critical thing. And that's this, I think, that leads to the cost and how it makes it expensive. So it's not just the cost, the type of storage, the type of insurance, type of transportation arrangement, and all that means that the cost of these other ancillary services was almost as high as the cost of the financing charge that the bank was going to make. And I think that you need an expert to guide you and to talk you through, and for you to understand what you're really going into and to guide your hand through that process. So it's going to be very individualistic. It's going to be very tailored towards the client's objective. So I think that we'll have to point it to the right party in the group to give.
I wonder whether you have time to go around the exhibition upstairs.
Yes, I did.
Are you converted? The process started in my office.
I spoke to you in the office and I was fully converted. So I went down with Will and I was looking at. I was happy everything was sold because when I heard some of the prices, I was lost my face. With that, they were all gone, so I could look better.
I think that if you're really interested, we can find something.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Now I move to my sister, Bimpe Conchu. Now, Bimpe, there's some strands of what Eric spoke about, which I think are directly relevant to the area in which you have expertise. If I have a collection, and not me, and I'm getting advanced in my years, eventually, it seems, I will die. What am I going to do with the collection? Do I intend to sell it? Am I going to give it to a museum? Am I going to share it out amongst my children? Am I going to burn it? So all these options have implications. Funnily enough, there are tax implications, there are all kinds of implications. So could you guide us a bit on how people are looking at this and how they're handling these issues?
So, what is it complicated? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Excuse me, my voice is slightly husky from the hectic week. It's not up to you.
Did you say from Champagne?
In the VIP room, yes.
No,
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Thank you. Just to give you a slight context, I'm a lawyer, but also, like I now mentioned, married to an avid art collector, so it's kind of in our DNA. But at the same time, I'm also a trusted advisor to many families talking about their wealth. And their wealth really isn't just about the cash in the bank. The wealth is everything from their illiquid and liquid assets, and even their children, because at the end of the day, those also have children invest a lot of time and money in those children who are actually going to be the custodians of the wealth that you're carrying. So the discussions we have are around everything from liquid assets and what to do with them now and later, especially when it comes to leaving a legacy. Now, in that context, African art has become and is becoming an increasingly important asset class. I think it used to be a lifestyle asset, but it's now becoming much more, gaining ground, seriously, when you look at the prices that have been fetched at international auctions. So the interest is increasing. And suddenly I've found that a good number of clients, especially Nigerian clients, especially in the older generation, are holding pretty valuable collections, which they haven't appreciated at all. which are sitting on the walls of their homes, are things that really could, I say to some of them, be trust funds for their grandchildren, could pay, children's school fees, could buy real estate elsewhere if and when we decide to dispose of it. So in treating African art as an asset class, one of the things that I advise clients that we're trying to be proactive, first of all, is this is a long-term store of wealth. What are your plans for it? Now, it's an asset class that also has a lot of emotional, I would say, connotation for most collectors. It's not like a car or a house or even stocks and shares, which collectors, when they're investing in those things, they usually have an exit plan, a strategy to sell that property or sell the stocks and shares for liquidity later on. Most collectors are collecting out of their passion, and so they don't actually want to discuss disposal. They definitely don't want to just think that when they are no longer here, their children may actually not treat the art properly or even dispose of it responsibly. So hence the need to think of a legal framework that's also going to become an obligation for the family. Because when you have your art collection held through, say, a private foundation or a company with some rules and regulations embedded, it's best to do it in your lifetime. And therefore, you ensure that you are giving clear guidance to your family members or to your colleagues in the bank and the work, if it's a collection that's held in a corporate entity, what you want to happen, what should happen later on. So putting legal structure around it enables you to have that discussion and communication with your family. And like I said, most art collectors don't want to think of disposal, but it's down to the collector's own choice, whether they want to dispose of it in their lifetime as a collection, donate it to a museum, for example, or to community, out of philanthropy. And sometimes they want to have their name on it as a legacy. And then every day the Tate in England, the Sainsbury Wing, the British Museum, they're all things that were donated by families. So you might want to do that, but it's really down to the collector to choose. And once they've decided, having had this discussion with themselves, their family members, and an advisor like myself, it's then the next step is, what's the best structure to actually implement this?
Excellent. So, in terms of structures, what are the options? I mean, I think perhaps we can just talk about, depending on what the wish is, there may be a structure that suits it, and perhaps talk a little bit also about what's available in the domestic market in terms of options and what is available beyond these shores.
Now, in terms of options, I mean, again, as an advisor, my work is really to bridge the gap between, say, what a bank or an asset management company can provide to support the client's options. So, if we're looking at legacy, something that the client wants to ensure will be around after we've left, a trust is often a good start. A trust means that you are handing over those assets, a legal title, ownership of the assets, to hopefully a corporate. I would always advise a corporate trust company, not to an individual. That corporate trust company could be housed in, service provider IBTC. I know they have, Stanbic has very good trust services. So imagine I decide as an advisor that we need to find a corporate house that can ensure trusteeship. The first thing I will want to ensure is that the trustees have the knowledge of this asset. So I would encourage the banks and asset managers here to actually, I would say, replicate what's happening internationally, to have very sound advisors who know the art world, who know how to value, who know how to risk assess, and who know how to ensure provenance of this collection. So a trust ensures that having given the assets to the title to be held by a corporate house, the instructions in the trust deed, it's almost like your living will, is what actually formulates your own wish. Instructions may say things like, I want to ensure that this the three of them I have are given to each of my 3 grandchildren. The rest can be sold. It's totally up to you and you can be as specific as you like when you're trusting. Or you can say, I want the whole collection to be housed, in a particular bank's headquarters or a museum. And again, it's for the trustees to ensure it's done properly, it's valued, it's protected, and all of that. So now, where the trust differs from a foundation, and I'm sure many people hear about art foundations internationally, Now, a trust, again, like I said, is giving the assets to a third party to hold. At the end of the day, you can only give a letter of wishes to the trustees, because usually the trustees will exert some discretion. They might decide against what you've given because that particular bank or museum is no longer interested, and they might decide to divert it elsewhere or sell the collection when you're not there. And when you use a trust, unfortunately, you can't actually maintain control. You can't keep your family involved if you would like to. A private foundation, however, is a structure that's internationally known. It's a structure where it's a company, and a company that has some governance. So the company would have a council, and that council would become where you and your family would sit with your advisors, with your investment bankers, the financial advisors, and discuss and agree what to do with the art. And that foundation is much more of a living, energetic way to interact with your next generation, because you actually, the stewardship of what they're going to hold and the importance of the collection can be communicated through a foundation. The trust, less so.
So, if I put it in simpler terms, you have more control with the foundation and less control with the trust, in the sense that the trustees would be able to exercise some independent discretion. I'd like, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because if you look at our culture, I remember doing an agreement for a very successful and senior businessman in Nigeria. And he created a trust, and he said, some aspect of the property, he said, the proceeds are for my consumption, and that I must write it in the agreement. The proceeds are for. I spoke, he listened to me, we had 3 meetings in his house. At the end of it, he said, Lijadu, I love everything you're saying, but write it there. The proceeds are for my consumption. So culturally, this thing of sort of letting go or handing discretion to someone else can be a bit of a difficulty. Is this something you've come across?
Absolutely, and I think that's where private foundations try to bridge that gap. However, and I know the experts in the room will say to me, you can reserve some power in a trust. You can put some clauses in there, but there's a limit. You can also be a beneficiary. So, for example, if you who own the art have actually put it in a trust, handed it to Islamic IBTC to hold as trustees, and there as trustees, recognizes that you're also a beneficiary, if and when any of the art is sold, according to the trustees' wishes, or I would say execution of your wishes, yes, you would benefit on the proceeds because you're a beneficiary. But I would say there is a limit to how much interaction. The minute the person who has given the assets away starts to drive the detail of what is happening, it's no longer a trust. And there are lots of legal issues and problems you will run into if you don't treat a trust as it should be.
Of course, one of the benefits of a trust is usually there'll be some tax.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about tax planning, and not to get too technical. However, when you put an asset, and I think many people here in Nigeria probably use companies to hold real estate or other assets, or liquid and illiquid assets. When you put an asset in a company or a trust, it's no longer yours legally. Therefore, the tax, your tax status, so if you're a higher rate taxpayer, is removed. You're at arm's length. And therefore, this is why, again, you mustn't be seen to exerting too much control. The more control you exert, the more, even in a foundation, the more the taxman, especially internationally, will actually disregard the trust or the foundation. And just going to foundations, even though it does give you some control, the advice is to always have other people on the foundation council. So it wouldn't be just yourself. So if you're 4 of you and only 1 of you is the collector, and you have an advisor, financial planner, a family lawyer, therefore the taxman will not see the decision making and the benefit, especially the monetary benefit, to be yours alone, because the minute it is, the tax implication. Just on tax as well, inheritance tax is something that's death duties is paid worldwide on your assets when you pass on. Now, if you hold that collection in your name, and I have a lot of clients who still own significant pieces of art in their name. On passing, now that we know that there is a recognized value of African art, on passing, even if you say to HMRC or Inland Revenue here, oh, it's only worth 100,000 naira. It's going to say, really? I looked at the last Bonham auction, or Sotheby's auction, and a piece by that same artist went for £50,000. especially which was painted the same way, same theme, likely it's worth that. And then your family, who you were hoping to benefit from the collection, has to either run around to find money to pay the tax or sell it. However, if you put it in a company, foundation, or trust, it's not yours. A trust doesn't die. A foundation does not die. And therefore, even on passing, especially when you've put your nice wishes in a governance document or a living trust deed, the taxman cannot even, no matter how much tax he thinks he's going to earn from that, cannot charge the family.
So really, it's quite essential to plan what's going to happen in the future to this collection of works that has grown into something that often is far beyond the individual who put them together. And I think there's a sort of onus on all of us to start thinking that way. I mean, I can speak personally that I always sort of refused to be categorized as a collector because I just thought I was doing what I love. But there's a certain point when there's a sort of transcendence. All of a sudden you realize that, especially since there's an absence of really, an array of institutions that are looking at culture and preserving our art and preserving our history, a lot of our history, a lot of those works are in private hands. And so all of a sudden, our identity, our history, you now have a responsibility beyond yourself. And part of the issue is, how do you rise to this responsibility? And it takes planning. It was really interesting. I was at the talk by Lemmy yesterday, and he spoke about, he said, I think Misla asked him how he sees himself. And he said, I'm not a revolutionary, I'm an evolutionary, because you have to plan. And I think that's exactly right. We have to plan. All of us, the identity, the cultural history of our country is in our hands, and how do we plan for it? And I think, is this something that people speak about, explicitly, or is this something you sense behind what they're trying to do?
I think again, art fairs like this are creating an amazing awareness of this important legacy whether it's contemporary art tomorrow will be modern art, will be ancient art, in hundreds of years' time. So it is part of our legacy, and thankfully African artists are using subject matter that is relevant to us today. So it's part of the message, the narrative that's coming out of the continent in a more positive way. So therefore, you find collectors who are now recognizing that their responsibility to hopefully maintain the collection, hopefully maybe one day donate it, but also, more importantly, they can use that collection as philanthropy. And one of the things we do when I'm working with families who are looking at setting up their own family trusts or structures is how can they maintain, because a family's reputation and brand is mixed up with your activities. So if you're starting to be seen as a collector, part of your family's brand and reputation is mixed into not only that you buy, collect, and art just because you want to amass wealth, but actually you're doing it as a way to support up-and-coming artists. You're doing it as a way to make Africans artists, talented artists, realize that there is actually a career, in the arts. And by doing so, your collection you might decide once a year, and it's something I've spoken to a client recently, once every 5 years to sell in a significant piece, because the proceeds he will use to support, art residencies and that kind of thing. So you can't, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the art is positive, the narrative, but the proceeds and the investment is really generating an amazing interest in the continent's, legacy.
The truth of the matter is that there is a lot of artworks that are created. Probably, let me also put on my hat as an analyst, maybe only 5% of every work that is ever made, maybe even 1% would ever break into that asset class. So let's be clear about what we're talking about. But it is important, through the ages, art has always been created. People in Nigeria in particular, Africa generally, have always been sponsors and patrons of the arts. History is well documented. This is how we got here. It is the continuation of that practice and that history that we are seeing in contemporary times. Okay, in my particular case, I have been interested in collecting both traditional art as well as modern and contemporary art pieces. So for me, I have never, and I'm trying to be careful here, I have never pursued art as a store of value. Okay, I hope that I have been careful. You see, if you buy what you love, okay, and if you precede your collecting with like in everything, take your time, educate yourself, be knowledgeable about what you're doing, then you are likely to make the right choices. Even when you are thinking of aesthetics, there is a process of refining your sense of aesthetics, which is what leads you to picking which artist is likely to become important, and there is so many genres of art. You cannot possibly cover everything, but if you pick carefully, you probably would over time. And I think another thing today is that collecting, if you stay in long enough, it is like a marathon race, not a 100 meters dash. So over time, just incremental steps, one piece at a time, is how you build, I think, a decent collection. Now, the other thing to say about, from a collector's point of view, when we talk about value, for me, it is all about return. Because people forget that if you bought a piece of art for 100 naira, and in 3 years you can sell it for 5,000, the multiple is staggering. It's the same thing as buying something for 1 million and selling and being able to get 50 million. So that everybody doesn't have to go for the Benin Woo-woos. Collect art in your own time. So if you do that, those artists are going to become important. A lot of the artists we know now are probably, even some of the people I know are way too expensive for me. And, I lick my wounds, I'm thinking, that's fine. Let the bigger guys buy them. I would hope that I can find a place to enjoy and go and visit. I don't have to own everything. Okay, so that is my own initial contribution to this talk.
Thank you very much, Femi. Okay, so you're a fighter, not a lover. Okay. Now, I have this quote from Sir Kenneth Clark where he said, "Serious collectors that I know are focused on the art. They are not looking for a decorative item or a good investment. There is some aspect of the work that has hooked them." Now, so could you speak about this in the sense of your own journey? How did you start?
Okay, thank you very much. I wish you'd share that with me, but I'm also happy I didn't know it because it more or less summarizes what I've been talking about. For me, I try to find art that I find captivating. Okay, I like to look at a piece of art and to derive some joy, some inspiration. Okay, I think that an artist has to be able to see the same thing that I see and show me things that I cannot easily conceive. That is what I appreciate. Otherwise, if the artist is just painting what I see all the time, I prefer to get a digital camera. It does a far better job. I tell you that for nothing. Okay, now, and it was interesting listening to Njideka, because I have always believed, that only people who are deep can call to the deep. And it is clear to me that her success is not accidental. Because when you listen to her, I was really inspired just listening to her, what goes into the thinking and all that. And I think, that the beauty of all of this for us as collectors is that it kind of even helps, to show you that you are looking for something that is beyond the ordinary. Now, people talk about legacy and all of that. Listen, I think it is pretentious for any collector to start collecting thinking that I'm going to be a big man, I'm going to be a big collector. It's just foolhardy.
I think I better leave the stage now.
Okay, it's like, just do it because you love it. And hopefully, if you are careful, recognize, that there are a lot of big things, have a theme, just buy what you love. But as I said, education is important because that is where the value comes from. And if you do that, also these things are expensive. However, you do not need to be rich to be a collector. I am clearly not a rich man by any definition. I am not exactly poor, but I am not rich. Okay. So therefore, and also, look, I started buying my first painting when I joined Arthur Andersen, and we were paid laborers' wages, bright but poorly paid, So it has nothing to do with how much money
We're passing around handkerchiefs for anyone who wants to cry. Please.
Okay, so I think that, therefore, it is just to look for something, that you can always go back to. Like, for instance, when I went upstairs, the first day, I saw some painting there, and I was immediately engaged by this painting by an artist whose name I've never heard. And it is the one piece that I said, I have to own this. And I'm hoping that I can manage to find the resources to buy it. But that is really what I'm talking about. I didn't go there to say, who is this person? Now, this is, I don't know whether is an unknown. The work is expensive, but it is a name I have never heard. Probably a young person. Okay, you hope that that artist is careful and deep enough to continue to try to develop their art, again, as we heard from Njideka. I think too many of our artists are just churning these things out like commodities. These are not the kind of things that will, have value over time. There has to be something deeper. And in this work upstairs, I could see somebody, and later on when I went back, I think a friend of mine said, come and show me the works you like. And then we went back there. And I saw in this same picture that I already committed to buying, things that I didn't. There are some naughty objects in the painting, but I didn't see that. And I bet if I go back there and I look more, I will find new things. That is the nature of art.
Thank you very much. Now, Femi, I was just thinking, we have two, esteemed collectors who passed away recently, Chief Sami Olagbaju and Chief Rashid Badamosi. And they played an incredible role in the development of art in this country by nurturing artists, mentoring them, supporting them, and they've left an incredible legacy. I have another quote, which I hope you like as much as the first one. This is by Michael Wilson. And he said, I feel that when you have a collection like this, you have a responsibility to use it, not to hoard it. So that's why we loan and put on shows. We've produced books. It's a working collection. Now, I know that you produce books, and I know you have a lot of activities that you engage in beyond just buying works of art, and you also nurture artists. Now, could you talk a bit about the role, responsibility of a collector as, in terms of legacy and in terms of really, developing the art ecosystem?
Okay, thank you. As I said before, I think serious collectors invariably see themselves as patrons of the arts. Okay, and you spoke about corporate social responsibility. It could also be private social responsibility. Is that the whole essence of patronage is that you feel that you have a responsibility and the opportunity to afford people who have talent, to support them to pursue something that adds to the larger society, helps to motivate other people, helps to inspire people, even doctors. That is the value of the arts. I support the arts generally simply because I think that it is a reflection of who we are. And these are the kind of things that give us a sense of being, a sense of value, a sense of identity. And we need to project this because this is how we can get the rest of the world to see us the way we would like to be seen. That is a way we can give a voice that we as a people, we have something to contribute to the world. And this is the reason. Now, the first thing, therefore, is that over time, if you collect important pieces, you realize that the fundamental thing is that all human beings will die. That is a certainty. Africans don't like to talk about dying, but all of us, everybody in this room, at some point or the other, we will die. It's natural. If we didn't, where would everybody be? We have children every day. Now, therefore, these things will survive us. The first thing, therefore, is that all collectors have got to have the discipline. It's not easy to begin to document. You document and catalog the things you have, but also, we have I think, a duty to share with other people. We were having a conversation. I have seen some of the things you had, but that's a few years back. I'm sure you have so many other things now. But I see a lot of important collectors in this room, and I have not seen ever what many of them have. And if I haven't seen them, you can just imagine that we have so many valuable things. In fact, through the works of Sotheby's and Bonhams and all that, I have seen Nigerian works of that I never knew existed. Only God knows how many more of those things, exist. So that we have to have some kind of opportunity. In other places, the government would support the arts and give money to museums and all of that. Unfortunately, maybe because of pressure of economic development or corruption or poverty, whatever it is, we have let this slip, and we need to go back there. And I think that institutions, corporations like IBTC, Chapel Hill, Denham, Art House, and everybody else, we have a responsibility, to begin, to do what we can, to motivate other people.
That's very interesting. By the way, I want to thank you for lending us slides and pictures of your works. We've been showing some as we've been speaking. We may want to go to one or two of them to have you speak to a bit later. But I thought that let's look at the fact that, okay, you have a piece of work, like even if you look at the Ewanwu sculptures downstairs, which was so kindly lent by Access Bank. Now, a few years ago, let's say 20, 25 years ago, yes, Ben Ewanwu was well recognized, but in terms of value, his works had not hit sort of something that was regarded as significant in the international market. Mm-hmm. Now they have. And so the question I have is this. The work of art itself has not changed, but the context has. Now, who created that context that led to the change? And is it possible for us to create the context and define ourselves, define our own art, and be givers, not takers? Is that a way in which you look at art?
Well, I don't have a way. I think there is let me say, an established way of looking at these things. Now, let me speak specifically to Ben Ewanwu, as you did. The works, I met Ben Ewanwu in his lifetime. He was an artist, I thought, who was conscious of his own greatness. But he was very serious. He was people who knew he was a very serious artist. He practiced. People forget that this man did the same thing for over 50 years. When you do something continuously for that length of time, you just get better at what you do. But he was not.
Hopefully.
Yeah. No, inevitably you do. Inevitably. Okay, and in fact, our traditional artists, if you look at literature, and there's been a lot of documentation at African art, Nigerian art in particular, they learn by just repetition, just doing the same thing again and again, and they become so good at it. Now, going back to Ben Ewanwu, the works were always there. He made a decent living. However, what happened is that the value of artworks, and Nigeria is never going to be different, is museums, art historians and all that, when they begin to study, because people who dedicate time to studying something, they can look at the wide body of work that an artist has created, and they give you context. They talk to you through the different stages of the development. That is where the value comes from. And I think what happened in the case of Ben Ewanwu was it more or less coincided with the publication of the book by Sylvester Ogbeche, and also the interest of, which also helped the historians, art historians, because there's something for them to read and to study. And once people start looking, and the value that has come from that is that he's led the way. We are now looking at other Nigerian pioneers, and then the likes of Njideka. So this is what happens. That process has begun. But as I said before, you have to focus, the artists who are practicing, they should have focused on the quality. If the quality is good, inevitably success will come. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
Is it a random process, or is it a process that can you act as a catalyst? Is there a sense of awareness which can make a difference between the direction or at least the speed at which this happens?
No, surely, yes, I think so. The likes of Artex, is a catalyst. That is exactly what they are. I have had the opportunity of interacting with some of their guests. This process, it's the vision of a young lady 1 year ago, from 1 year to the other. Now, I think you have over 100 international visitors. I'm sure next year is going to get bigger. But around this, so many other things are happening. We have the Lagos Biennale. Okay, now, it probably would not have happened, but for this opportunity, many other things will come along. And so it is important, as we do this, we're getting many international visitors, people who have, if you like, the structure, and the wherewithal, to direct attention, to get other international collectors to be interested. But for me, I am really interested in the interaction between our local artists and that exposure to the rest of, other practicing artists from all over the world, because it would help them, to refine, and to improve, their work. So that, yes, we can be catalysts. And obviously, art only thrives where there's patronage, so that we need to continue to collect the works, so let us do what we do, and if we do that, and the artists who are very good at doing their work, the value will come over time. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Femi.
So I will ask for questions at this time. So if you have any questions, please write them down very quickly and then pass them to the side, and we'll have our ushers pick them up. So Femi, you have about 5 minutes to wrap up, and I'll give you the questions inside of that time.
Okay.
So, Femi, if I can just drop in, I wanted to say, and I think it's important from a local point of view, before Artex, I think another important catalyst, is Kavita here, so who started Art House. And I think they have played an incredible role because that was the first movement to formalize, the presence of a secondary market, at least for the modern and contemporary works. And their contribution is totally invaluable. And I thank you.
I think she made a direct impact on our net worth. Thank you, Kavita. So, Binkwe, I saw you nodding when Femi was talking, sorry. Was there something you wanted to comment on in particular from what he said?
I think the patronage of the arts is very important. I mean, it's one thing, the work of advisors or financial institutions is irrelevant if there isn't patronage, because patronage is what will ensure the continuity in a sustainable way. And I think also, the current status of the art market is making suddenly people realize that, gosh, I do have a collection, and yes, I do want to see this market continue and grow. And I'm actually proud infinitely of what the African art market is doing internationally. And therefore, even if that's the motivation, I think the patronage of art, the way that Femi is doing it, is super important.
Femi, could you also say a few words? Because your collection is a bit different from others in that you have like two sections, one could say. You have a section which is traditional Nigerian art, and then you have the contemporary and modern. I think we started showing some, if I go back, yes, so how did that happen?
Well, I guess, many of you, I don't know, half of you probably like the subject, the other half are very suspicious, so I suspect, that, let me just claim that you probably need to be a little weird. Maybe it helps,
But it inspired Picasso.
I was just kidding, really. I think it's all about your sense of aesthetics. The problem with traditional art is that many of us associate them with traditional religious practices, which people think is not compatible with Christianity or Islam and all of that, which is not really true. Because the people who carved these objects, if you go and look at art history, these are people who are professional artists. That was their profession. If you look at Olowe Ofise, for instance, he died in 1938. He is regarded as a genius and the most famous Yoruba carver. This guy was a court artist. He was engaged by the Olowe Ofise. He lived there in the palace, and he practiced his art, for royalty and chiefs within like a 60-mile radius of Ise, where he could traverse by foot and all that. And the people who lived in his time, they knew him, they have praise songs for him and all of that. Now, he did work for the palace. He carved for the Ogbonis, which are the traditional society. They did things, for, decorative purposes and all that, so that an artist would create his objects for different reasons. But whatever purpose it was used for, my interest is that they are essentially beautiful works of art, and this is really why they continue to thrive. This is why they will continue to thrive. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course it now traverses also into the sort of the contemporary and modern, and I think the two sort of complement each other quite well.
Yeah, because there is really no conflict in art, so it's like if you are fortunate, and you develop that sense of aesthetics, then that is really what it is. Some people like abstract art, some people like figurative paintings, in my own case, my interest is kind of broad, and as I said, I just pursue what I enjoy. I read, and because I gain insights, I continue to read, and because of that, it just helps you to enjoy the pieces more because other people try to show you things that you didn't see before and stuff like that. And the more you do that, the more you enjoy what you do.
Thank you very much, Femi. Now, we have one question from the audience. And it's this. I think it's addressed primarily to Femi, which is more important in reaching a decision to purchase a work of art? The art itself or the artist who created the work?
I would go for the art, okay? Go for the art, and if it's been created by a famous man, so be it. I mean, I already told you the story of the piece upstairs, so I know a lot of famous artists, many of them are my friends, and I maybe have one or two pieces, some of them I don't have any, because it is not the style, even some of the great artists, some art teachers, it is not the style of every artist that appeals to everybody, okay, and that is the first thing. And therefore, if you have the will, and the strength, just be true to yourself and go with what you like, So I would say go for the art, not the artist, yeah. I see an object, and I think it's interesting, so talking about the art and all of that. All of us go around with biases, that you don't know where they come from. Okay, I am not particularly fond of large people. I don't dislike them. I'm just talking, we're talking of aesthetics. But when an artist can do something...
I hope our lawyers are in the room.
Is this libelous?
No, of course.
Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say here, but this is a piece of work here that I absolutely love. And this is what I'm saying to you is that it is like somebody helps you to see that the issues, you see, for me, it's not about large or skinny. I'm looking for something beautiful. And therefore, beauty is not of one type. And you see, this is an example. I have another sculpture in my house, which is of a large woman. It is absolutely beautiful, so that this is what art can do, because it just shows you a different way of seeing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Femi. We have another question. How do we reconcile and improve the general attitude towards art when political mismanagement of Nigeria affects the education of art? I suppose that's about, funding, supporting, art education.
Absolutely. I think it's, again, I think it's going, that's the evolution of the way art is regarded is very much a responsibility for patrons, art fairs, gallerists, and even the auction houses. I think if people can start to regard art as a positive force, the art education is important, and the philanthropy around it. And I think if your art is documented, and if it's held together as a body of work, your collection, then you can actually lend it to the community. You can actually, if we had more spaces, more museums where people could walk in and see art and actually understand that perhaps the Yoruba art is part of our history. I think the narrative around, youth culture and the issues we have today, could be a story that is learned through art. So, but unfortunately, we don't, share the art that we hold. Holding it in a legal structure enables you to lend it out because you've insured it, there's a value and there's provenance, and you can say to a museum, I want to actually host a showing of Yoruba through the ages or whatever, the importance of the kings or importance of leadership. And actually you can, that message can be communicated through art. If someone has a selection of artwork that actually lends itself well to a positive message, a civic message, you could actually, use the art education in so many different ways. It can be quite powerful as a tool, and therefore, could actually help deal with some of the issues we have, today.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you say that, because in the conversations we have, even when we talk about ourselves and our culture, we're still in borrowed clothes. So I think sort of recapturing that space and speaking our own narratives and supplying our own context is very, very important. I mean, Femi, I know you've published books of your works, and you've made efforts to get that conversation going. And I think those critical conversations are also very important in speaking about who we are and where we're going as a people. I know that, for example, Kandinsky, was it Greenberg, the critic Greenberg, who played a very great role of explaining at that time to society why what this man was doing, which seemed so iconoclastic, was relevant to their state at the time. And I think that's the true relevance of art in Nigeria today. As we all know, art is the transforming experience. Thank you.